we're going to get started here. Welcome everybody to the first ITEN Second Thursday that we've had in person in over 2 years or a year and a half or something. So we're very excited to be back in person and hybrid, and excited to have John here to talk to us about storytelling tonight. We will be continuing, hopefully from this point forward, having at least hybrid events for Second Thursday. So in December, Second Thursday, we're going to have our validation cohort talking about their ideas and doing their pitches. So come in December, check that out. It should be down here in this space again, virtual if you want to log in online. But without further ado, we'll get to John here. He's going to go through effectively telling you, how to effectively tell your story. John Knicely is an entrepreneur himself and an Emmy award-winning storyteller. John spent 17 years as a news anchor, reporter in markets including St. Louis here at News 4, Seattle, Dallas, and Charlotte. Now he helps organizations clarify the right story that best resonates with an ideal target audience. That includes potential investors, clients, and internal team members. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to John to tell us how to tell our story.
All right. Well, thank you, Quentin. Thanks for everyone who took me here. This is a nice change of pace, I think, for all of us, based on what we've been dealing with the past year and a half plus, which, for the record, my business officially formed February 14th, 2020. So pretty good timing, right? So today, I'm excited to talk to you about storytelling. And one thing I will start off with, the word storytelling has been such a buzzword over the past few years that it means something different to each person. And so there's no right or wrong answer to it, but I'm going to specifically zero in on storytelling for business and for entrepreneurs. And as I share this process with you, I'm going to be sharing my journey as well, because a lot of this process is what's helped me get some clarity on how I need to run my business as a fellow entrepreneur. So my goal of this presentation is really that you're going to have some concrete takeaways. And I'm going to teach you a framework that I use. And I want you to be able to leave this session and have an understanding of, okay, this is how I can approach my messaging from here on forward. And it's a pretty basic framework. And I'm hopeful that you'll be able to gather that and take that and run with it. And then I'm going to teach you how to create power storytelling statements. So once you've learn this framework of how to craft your messaging, you should be able to boil it down into 1 or 2 sentences that's going to resonate with your target audience, whether that's a client, whether that's your team, whether that's strategic partners of yours. And so we'll get into that. Now, in the meantime, before we get into it, I want to start with an interactive example, more or less. So I'm hoping that this whole presentation is interactive. If you have questions in the middle of it, feel free to shoot up your hand, or if you're online, you could add a question in the chat, and we have people here monitoring that. So our first interactive portion is guessing the business. Okay, so I'm going to show you some of these core values that were on a Fortune 500 company's website. You've got to guess what business this was. So communication. We have an obligation to communicate. Respect. We treat others as we would like to be treated. Integrity. We work with customers and prospects openly, honestly, and sincerely. Excellence. We are satisfied with nothing less than the very best in everything we do. So this communication showed up in the shareholders meetings. It showed up on their website. Anyone have any guesses of the business? Facebook, okay. Yes? AT&T. That's a common one that I get. Whenever I use this example, AT&T is usually the first, one of the common guesses. Online, you could enter in the chat if you want. Any more guesses before I reveal? Okay. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. It is Enron. Did you know that from a previous conversation, or was that just organic? Okay, all right. I couldn't remember. So yeah, so what's the point of that? Well, there's nothing wrong with the words that were used. Those are values that a lot of companies aspire to, that a lot of companies put on their website. The reality is they're just words with nothing backing them. We as consumers have learned to tune it out. We don't believe it, right? I mean, we're in the show me state, so prove it, right? So you say you're all about those words. Yeah.
Yeah, you said a lot of companies, I would say all companies.
Right. Yeah.
It could have been anybody.
And you know what, if you're living up to those core values, great. That's a solid company that you want to be a part of, that you want to interact with and do business with. So again, there's nothing wrong with those words, but we as consumers are skeptical naturally now. We don't trust brand. We want them to show it and prove it. And so how do you do that? Well, authentic stories are one way, and I think the most effective way to do that, because you're hearing this story that you really can't argue with the facts of. I mean, you could maybe question it, but that's a way to resonate and to show those words. And if you do it well, you don't have to use the term authenticity or communication. By the story, it proves it without you even having to say respect, you know. So I'm going to share a little bit about my journey, and I alluded to this about how I got to become an entrepreneur myself, and a lot of the lessons I'm teaching today I've learned the hard way of sorts. So my background, as Quentin mentioned, was as a broadcast journalist, news anchor, reporter. I always had an eye on what's next. How do I fit into the business world? And it's not so different from many entrepreneurs. You know, you have a career like Tim and I were talking earlier. He was an attorney for how many years, Tim?
Yeah.
Okay, many years. So
Many.
before he jumped into entrepreneurship, he was a successful attorney. And that's the story of a lot of entrepreneurs, is we have a background in a specific discipline or business field. Roger right here, you know, data analytics, data storytelling. He worked for Enterprise for years before he launched his own business. And so when you are trying to make that path from a previous career into entrepreneurship, what I've learned is you have to learn, where do I add value? And so that's something that was part of my journey. So there was a path that a lot of broadcasters take into the business world as the communications role and such. And I have friends who do that and they love it. I knew I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go jump into a corporation and try to climb the ladder. I wanted to launch on my own. So I was meeting with friends in the business community in Seattle while I was working out there a few years ago, knowing this TV contract would be my last. And a friend of mine from my alumni group worked for Microsoft. We got together and he said, well, what do you love to do about your job? And I said, well, for me, it's storytelling. Some people love investigative journalism and want to uncover corruption, and that's great. And I've done some of that, but that's not my passion. Some people just want to be on TV. And, hey, look at me, I'm a personality. For me, you know, it's part of my job and I don't really care about that. It's telling great stories. And so he said, well, we have a storytelling team at Microsoft, a team that's independent of communications, independent from marketing, independent from PR, that is tasked with finding and telling authentic stories that highlight and promote the Microsoft brand. And that's when the light bulb went off in my head. And I said, yes, that's what I want. And so the first video I'm going to share with you is an example project from the Microsoft storytelling team. This was a commercial that aired in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. You may remember it. So here you go.
My name is Grover. Sean. My name is Ian. I'm Taylor.
My name is Owen, and I am 9.5 years old.
So Owen was born with a rare genetic disorder called Escobar syndrome.
He's had 33 surgeries to date.
I love video games, my friends, my family, and again, video games.
It's his way of interacting with his friends when he can't physically otherwise do it.
What I like about the adaptive controller is now everyone can play. You can just say, all right, that's that button, that's that button, that's that button. Perfect.
One of the biggest fears early on is, how will Owen be viewed by the other kids? He's not different when he plays.
No matter how your body is or how fast you are, you can play. It's a really good thing to have in this world.
My name is Grover.
Sean.
So that was a fun example of of what that looks like in action. Like what is storytelling look like inside a company? How do you use it to promote your brand? So that was the Xbox Adaptive Controller commercial, and I got to meet a guy named Steve Clayton, who's Microsoft's chief storyteller. And the way he tells his story is 10 years ago, one of the executives had this vision to create this independent division that wasn't focused on selling more Xboxes or selling more, Microsoft products, but let's just promote and highlight the brand. So a friend of mine who's an entrepreneur said, well, that's great. Microsoft has a storytelling team and companies like Boeing do, but most companies don't. So you could go in independently and help a lot of companies as a third party. And so it's not in place of marketing, it's not in place of PR, in place of communications, it's complementary too. But even to that point, at this point in my journey, I still didn't understand necessarily how do I add value, except I like to tell stories. So, hey, come pay me to tell stories, right? That doesn't really resonate with businesses. That doesn't make them want to sign the dotted line. But me as a creative storyteller, that's what I wanted. Well, I just tell good stories, so hire me, right? So my journey continues, and I'll share another video with you that's been one of my favorites over the last couple of years that came online. So I'm going to encourage you to start with who. This is something that I've learned, but especially when it comes to messaging, we got to start with who, understanding who we're trying to reach. Now, a lot of you are probably familiar with Simon Sinek and start with why. I'm a big fan of that. I am a believer in that. You need to know your why for sure. But when it comes to messaging, I say you need to start with who. Who are you trying to reach? And then reverse engineer the process. So a great example of that, another video I'm going to show you from our friend Steve Jobs, who had this brilliant video. This is from 1998 at some developer conference. He's going to tell more of a business context of why you want to start with who, but I just love this clip.
Mr. Jobs, you're a bright and influential man.
Here it comes.
It's sad and clear that on several counts you've discussed, you don't know what you're talking about. I would like, for example, for you to express in clear terms how, say, Java, in any of its incarnations, addresses the ideas embodied in OpenDoc. And when you're finished with that, perhaps you could tell us what you personally have been doing for the last 7 years.
You know, you can please some of the people some of the time, but one of the hardest things when you're trying to affect change is that people like this gentleman are right in some areas. I'm sure that there are some things OpenDoc does, probably even more that I'm not familiar with, that nothing else out there does. And I'm sure that you can make some demos, maybe a small commercial app that demonstrates those things. The hardest thing is, how does that fit in to a cohesive, larger vision that's going to allow you to sell $8 billion, $10 billion of product a year? And one of the things I've always found is that you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it. And I've made this mistake probably more than anybody else in this room. And I've got the scar tissue to prove it. And I know that it's the case. And as we have tried to come up with a strategy and a vision for Apple, it started with what incredible benefits can we give to the customer? Where can we take the customer? Not starting with, let's sit down with the engineers and figure out what awesome technology we have, and then how are we going to market that.
All right. I just love his response to such a brutal question. And it's true. And it rings true for me in my entrepreneurial journey. I like storytelling. So I'm just going to do it, right? I mean, well, I got to start with who am I trying to reach and why is it valuable to them and how does it add value to them? And so that also goes for our messaging. And the messaging framework is we got to start with who are we trying to reach and make the story about them so that when they hear the story, it's not just, oh, that's a cool story, but it's, oh, that's a story I want to be a part of that I can engage with. So when you're looking at who are you trying to reach, part of this, I learned being in the broadcast news business, you know, as we got ready for the morning news, which I did for 3 years in St. Louis, 7 years in Seattle, our vision of who we're speaking to with each story. We're writing a story to a mother who's in the kitchen getting her kids ready for school. And that means we know that she's not paying close attention. So we need verbiage and language that's going to grab her attention over and over and over again. So that's just a framework that we had in our minds. Now, it didn't mean that the news wasn't going to resonate with Quentin or with someone else, but this was who we're trying to reach. So we had a focus, and it's going to reach more people than that, but that gave us some clarity. So I had some of that background. And then as I've been studying the storytellers in business, those who do it well, what I've learned is you got to use the force. And so it sounds kind of cheeky and childish almost, but Star Wars is a perfect framework for storytelling. And most Hollywood movies are, really, but Star Wars specifically, and so much so that the mentors and business guides that I've learned the most from on business storytelling all point to Star Wars. That includes Microsoft's chief storyteller, Steve Clayton, who I've got a chance to personally learn from. Procter & Gamble has a chief storyteller, a guy named Shane Meeker, and he was gracious enough to do a few Zoom calls with me and coach me. And then if anyone's familiar with building a story brand, Donald Miller, that all three of them independently point to Star Wars as a great framework. So that's what we're going to walk through today. And I'm going to help you understand how you can use that framework to craft all of your messaging, whether it's towards a potential client, whether it's to your own team members or strategic partners, whatever that might be. By the way, so Steve Clayton and Shane Meeker both have TED Talks on storytelling. So you can check those out if you're curious. And then Donald Miller, of course, has the book, Building a Story Brand, as well as a great podcast called Business Made Simple. All right, so your target audience is always the hero. You know, all of us want to share what we do, what we know, what we can bring to the table and make it about us. But we're not the hero when it comes to messaging. The most effective messaging makes your target audience the hero. And so what I coach people through is, let's get in the mind of who our target audience is. Who are we trying to reach? And what's their world look like? What does being a hero mean to them? And so whatever your product is or whatever your service is, think about who your ideal target audience is, your ideal target client, and really get in their world and try to put yourself in their situation. So what I typically do with a team is I go through a whiteboarding session and we all take turns bouncing around. Okay, well, I think it's a middle-aged man in middle America. Okay, so what, or you know, whatever the category is, it could be a teenager who's struggling with acne, you know, if you're an acne brand, right? So get in their world. What's that teenager with acne struggling with? Oh, they're insecure. And so you're writing all these things out to really get in their world. And part of that is identifying that you're not the hero. This is you. You're Yoda or Obi-Wan Kenobi. Your business is the guide that helps Luke Skywalker discover the Force, that helps the hero discover what they need to defeat the villain and become the hero. And so the villain are pain points. Darth Vader, the Emperor. So what you do, what I do with teams is really list that out. So we've listed out our hero, who are we trying to reach, and what are their characteristics, what's their world look like right now? What are the villains that they're facing? What are the issues that they're trying to overcome, whether it's trying to increase sales, whether it's, you know, you can think about it from whatever your business is and think about the villains that you're helping the hero overcome. And I just reiterated here, you know, you're Yoda massaging the back of Luke Skywalker. It's so easy for all of us to make ourselves the hero. Here's who we are. Here's what we do. We can do X, Y, and Z. We've got this product feature, that product feature. But if you effectively tell the story, you can tell it through the lens of who you're trying to reach, while also highlighting that we've got this feature, that feature. And the way we frame it is this feature and that feature helps our hero defeat the villain and overcome and achieve a certain outcome. And so part of that is, let me see, did I skip one? I think I did. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so where to start? You know, we're really laying out who your hero is. And again, this is a framework that can be used even for your own team members. If you're rolling out a new program that is going to have an impact on your team, when you prepare to share that message, even if it's in a setting like this, or if it's in an email, you can use the same framework. Who are we trying to reach? Or we're reaching our team members. Well, what are their issues, and how does my message today impact their world? And structure it that way. That it's more inviting for them to join the story. And at the end, we need to also identify, since you helped that hero overcome the pain point, what did that help them achieve? And when you can include that into the story, then it really opens their eyes to, okay, I was struggling with lack of productivity with these employees. And when we solved that problem, thanks to your help, we were able to achieve X, Y, or Z, you know, increase, fourth quarter sales results, whatever that is. So you can go through this process, you know, whiteboard it out, pen and pad, and scribble this out, and it's going to start to become more clear to you. So if you think about businesses, maybe examples of clients that you've worked with or companies you admire that you think do great storytelling in this framework, or any companies come to mind from anyone? Monday.com. Monday.com. And remind me, what's their business again?
I don't know if they make great. It's like trouble.
It's like project management.
Project management. Okay, yeah.
Subaru.
All right, so Ryan says Subaru as a Subaru driver. And yes, Subaru absolutely is one. And I'm going to show an example.
It worked if I had, decided if I'd been driving Toyota.
Well, but look, I'm going to show you why Subaru is so great at storytelling. And I'm not a Subaru driver. I don't think I ever will be. But I greatly, no offense, right? It's okay, a little offense. I know Ryan well, so it's okay.
A little offense.
GoPro. What's that, GoPro? Yeah, I think GoPro is a great example too. So I'm going to show you a couple of ads that I recently saw that really stood out to me, and this is just in the last week, honestly, a couple of these. So go back to trusty YouTube here. So this is an Amazon commercial that just launched in the last week or so, or 2 weeks maybe.
Maureen is saving big holiday shopping at Amazon, so now she's free to become Maureen the Merrier. Food is her love language, and she really loves her grandson, like really loves. Maureen is saving big holiday shopping at Amazon, so now she's free to become Maureen the Merrier. Food is her love language, and she really loves her grandson.
I love it, right? So we can walk back through the hero framework. So Maureen is saving big on Amazon. So saving was the pain point. She needed to save money in order for her to achieve her dream, her goal, and it was to do it big for her family at Thanksgiving and give her grandson a huge T-bone steak or whatever that is. So you can quickly see, I think everyone would have agreed that was a pretty neat commercial before thinking about it in these terms. But now you can think about it through these terms and realize, okay, yeah, this was a story framework. We're making Maureen the hero. Amazon isn't the hero. Amazon's letting Maureen be the hero to give this great Thanksgiving dinner. So there's one example. Another one, this is from Indeed that I just recently saw. So this commercial was a little more heavy on Indeed, the business, but it still was talking about, it was framing the hero in their terms. We help the ones ready for get jobs, and they go through these different examples. And so if you're someone out there watching this commercial, you think, man, I really hate my job today. I'm ready for a change. You know, this is going to resonate with you. So that's why this is effective again, using that language. Yeah.
Facebook promotes the groups.
That's awesome. Yeah. And is that on on the Facebook website? Oh, on TV. Okay.
Gotta get connected to like other, everyone's nerdy about something.
Okay. Yeah, great example. So for those in Zoom land, if you didn't hear, he was talking about how Facebook does a great job of promoting their groups and making the group the hero. Facebook's just the platform to make the group the hero, right? Yeah, cool. All right, and now we get to Ryan's example. These are two other great companies. If you think about Hallmark ads, you know, Hallmark as a company, you would think is kind of positioned for this type of storytelling, but you know, when they're advertising, it's showing these heartwarming moments. Well, what are they selling? They're selling a couple pieces of paper with, you know, some wording in it, but they don't make it about that. They make it about the experience. When you give someone a Hallmark card, you're, you know, whatever, you're achieving this goal and result. And then Subaru. So this one, I'm not gonna lie, this one has made me tear up just even watching it. And I don't have a daughter, but this is a great commercial.
Turning in the grain again, the bells begin to chime. Time, she says, there's no turning back. Keep your eyes on the tracks through the fields. Somewhere there's blue. Oh, time will tell, she'll see us through.
Hey, she's all yours. You can pass down a Subaru, but you get to keep the memories. That's why we got another Forester.
Love. It's what makes a Subaru a Subaru.
Yeah, the cleanest car ever.
What was that? The name?
He's never cleaned a car in 20 years.
There you go. Yep, love it. So yeah, I mean, think about that commercial. Subaru, like, what difference would it have made if it was a Honda or Toyota? Like, you could still pass it down to your daughter, like, right? But Subaru's created this brand and this following where.
I'm gonna say Ryan might not agree with you on that.
Will you hold it back?
Yeah, I got
to jump up here. Sorry, do you have a comment? Yeah.
Subarus are awesome.
Exactly what you said. Subarus did such a magnificent job of staking their claim and having that difference.
Yeah.
And storytelling just supports what they're comparative advantages. So
yeah,
that's a great example.
Yeah, because right. So what if it was an old pickup truck, you know, that you hand down to your son? Like, I mean, that it could be the same story, but Subaru has really owned that niche. And did they talk about a single feature of their vehicle in that commercial? Some of their commercials they might, and that's okay. Keep showing the logo, yeah, the branding, yeah, right, yeah. So
a lot of creative depth and production value there, right? You can say a lot if you can afford that.
Yeah, for sure, right? And so that was, so his point was that there was a lot of creative production value there, and there certainly was, and that. You know, that probably wasn't a true story. Those were actors, and you know, that wasn't a real dad with his daughter over the years. So that case, you know, may not be the authentic storytelling, but it's still relatable. Yeah, it's brand storytelling.
They also built the implied reliability.
That's great. Yeah. So implied reliability. It's this car has been here for his daughter's whole life. Yeah, didn't have to say it. Great point, right? So that goes back to what I was saying is Subarus are reliable. That wasn't even said. but that was achieved through the story and the messaging. And I believe that's more powerful. If this commercial would have started, Subarus are reliable, it's kind of would have been like, all right, just more white noise, right? And so I touched on this earlier, that once you have identified the hero, who you're trying to reach, what are their pain points, how do you help them overcome their pain points to achieve an outcome, you can come up with what I call a power storytelling statement. Has anyone read New Sales Simplified by Mike Weinberg? Roger, yeah, it's a great book. I recommend it. He talks about these power statements as well in his book, and so I've drawn from that. And I didn't even know this, but he's a St. Louis guy. He's a known sales leader, but great book. So a power storytelling statement, and I've got an example. This is a client that I've worked with, and he does insurance brokerage, and he's got 5 different niches that he focuses on. One is precision manufacturers. So the statement we came up with was precision manufacturers partner with scare and insurance brokers to design and deliver high quality customized insurance programs that help them control the variables of risk. So we start the sentence with who we're trying to reach, precision manufacturers. So instead of we're scare and insurance brokers and we can help you blah, 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 by starting it with precision manufacturers partner with scare and insurance brokers, if you're a precision manufacturer, you're immediately going to be drawn into this because it's pulling you in. It's talking about you. So this could be a social media post. And that's something that I want everyone to take away from this is you understand this framework and you go to write a social media post business-wise, think about who you're trying to reach and make them the subject of the message. Not every message is going to have that, but it's just something to keep in mind. And then I'll show mine, which is, if I'm doing this, I better be able to prove it, right? So my power storytelling statement is organizations that need a great introduction to potential clients or investors use VITA Lux to get crystal clear on the message and story that will best resonate with that ideal target audience. So hopefully, if you're an organization that needs a great introduction to potential investors, you think, oh yeah, this could be me. This is inviting me into the story. And yeah, go ahead.
So when you're writing something like that, is it better to reach your ideal target market, or is it better to give it to your, what's the right way of saying it, like an achievable, like for instance, the first one, it might not necessarily be precision manufacturer, but they want to be precision manufacturer.
So my answer to that question is yes. And here's why. Because there's no wrong answer and there's not one power storytelling statement. You can come up with multiple. And so you would want, and in fact, this insurance broker, we have a general story that we have. And so we have that statement as well. The more specific you can get, the more clearly you invite that specific audience into your story. But yeah, you can have a general story and a specific niche related. And so if you have a website that, your general story might be one thing more bland, but then you have a link that says precision manufacturers, someone's going to click on that and then they're going to see that statement.
Not someone, almost everyone, because they want to be, they see themselves in that.
Yeah, ideally. Yep, that's good. And for my projects, a lot of the organizations that come to me, it's for a video story, and I showed commercials today. Now it's easy to do in a presentation like this, but again, this is valuable beyond just a video. This goes for your team meetings. This goes for your one-on-one sales calls. It's just a framework to think about how do I engage that next client. And I'll use an example of mine. There's a business brokerage out of Colorado Springs that used us to create some video stories. We went through this process with them, and the president of that company, we did the videos. They were really happy with them. Afterwards, he said, you know what? Now, when I go to write my thought leadership pieces, because he deals mainly in dental practices, he's like, I know I have a framework of how to write my messaging. So the value can go a long ways once you start to think of things in these terms. And one thing I wanted to touch on before we open it up for more questions, is specific storytelling to investors. I'm part of a group called Prota Ventures, Prota Ventures, protaventures.com. It's a collaboration of people who are focused on helping early stage startups grow. And so I have a value I bring in storytelling, but the group is made up of some people who really know this space. And they were in town a couple weeks ago. Quentin and I were there, and Ryan and some others, to hear some pitches and to connect with the Prota Ventures people. And after 3 different startups gave their pitches, Will Little, the founder of Prota Ventures, gave some valuable feedback, and I'm going to just reiterate what he was saying. So if you're specifically speaking to investors, a VC group, if you're a startup, what they were saying, the key is first share your heart. They want to know that you're passionate about what you're doing. So Simon Sinek, start with why. And then the next thing that they wanted to hear is show your revenue streams. And so, these are investors who are interested in, how can our investment end up making us money? And so that was a real key that I took away from that. I'm not in the process of raising money myself, but I know a lot of startups are. And so I just wanted to pass along that tidbit to understand your revenue streams and to be able to show them in their words is the most effective way to speak to them and make them interested in investing in your company. And I would even invite Quentin to comment on that. Do you have any thoughts on that? We're in the same meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on those. I mean, I think that too, and Ryan, since he was there as well, actually, being able to concisely talk about, they also want to see multiple revenue streams, right? So that's the thing, right? That was one of the things they iterated on is where is the money coming from, and having a strong financial model, spending time doing a financial model.
Yeah, and Ryan, financial modeling is your expertise. But do you have any comments as far as that would be helpful, you think, on just the financial modeling?
Yeah, well, I think it's 2 things. Is the financial modeling obviously helps a company, or first, a company is trying to raise capital, understand their business and be able to communicate that and be able to answer questions about it. But really, it's most people look at that in terms of the numbers, but really understanding your financial model helps you tell a very concise, clear, impactful financial story.
Yeah. So understanding your financial model helps you tell a clear, concise, impactful financial story. And that's specifically when you're talking to potential investors.
And I'll say, to tag onto that too, as a founder, being the one who knows it, not trying to offload that to someone else to build the model for you, right? Like they expect you to know and have that down pat. No matter if finances are your passion or good zone, something you're good at, you're the one that's expected to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, and that's part of the challenge of being an entrepreneur is you have to be good at everything to start out, right? And I'm learning that the hard way as I go myself. So, well, that really wraps up the majority of the process. I wanted to leave you with a couple of resources. I mentioned the TED Talks, Steve Clayton, Shane Meeker. Those are both about 15-minute clips you can find on YouTube. They're interesting. The book that's helpful, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, really dives into this framework concept. And podcasts that I've really enjoyed as I looked to launch my entrepreneurial career is How I Built This. It's an NPR podcast. Anyone fans of that? Yeah, Guy Raz. Yeah, and so those stories are helpful for us entrepreneurs because he walks through the hard times with highly successful people. So it kind of helps us on hard days. We're like, oh, they struggled with this too and had uncertainty and all that. So that's a great podcast. Marketing Made Simple is connected to Donald Miller's company. And that specific one, Marketing Made Simple, talks a lot about this framework context too. Business Made Simple is another separate podcast that I enjoy as well. And so I just wanted to offer something for those in attendance today, including everyone online. I'm offering a 15-minute call with me to help you craft your power storytelling statement. So if it's something that you're interested in, I ask that you just go to my website, VITAluxagency.com/partnership, and fill out the info and you can email me and just, STL Startup Week. And what I would ask that you do when we have our 15-minute call, if you want to do it, is come prepared. So I have already gone through this process with who are you trying to reach, what's their world look like, what are their pain points, how do you help them overcome that? And then we can talk through how to boil it down to 1 or 2 sentences that you can use on your website, use in any type of material you have. Was that?
All of that in 15 minutes, it's not.
Well, so what we're gonna do in 15 minutes is zero in on the statement. So you gotta do this homework before the call. So you gotta be clear on who you're trying to reach, what are their issues, and how do you help them overcome it. And once you get to that, and you can explain that to me, that's part of my skill set as a broadcast journalist, is writing 15-second stories, 30-second stories. So it comes in handy now in this entrepreneurial aspect of what I'm doing. Well, that really wraps up the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, any interesting comments anyone has on any other companies that they've noticed that do this well, or other outlets of storytelling that have been inspirational to you that I could maybe benefit from.
I will say too, so the story you're talking about here is also called The Hero's Journey for anybody that wants to Google it. So there's tons of content out there about the hero's journey. And it's also a part, and John, you're one of our mentors that does the Eureka programming now. It's also a part of our Eureka ideation programming. So part of the programming we do, we don't get you down to this power of storytelling statement. So I still think you guys should do that. It's a very valuable tool. But is spending some time going through this, designating who's the hero, who's the villain, that sort of stuff, using the Star Wars example, because again, that is the easiest one that I think most people have seen. And once you spend a little bit of time learning about the hero's journey, you'll start to see it everywhere, and you realize that like every movie is the same, and every book is the same.
Yeah.
So question, if your target market is parents, do you write the story from the voice of the child, or do you write the story from the voice of the parent?
Can you give me a little more context of the target market? So parents in a specific.
Parents looking for learning resources.
Okay, so parents looking for learning resources. Yeah, I think you speak to the parent, but since their child is a big part of that, who needs the learning resource? The child does. I think you can speak to the parent through the child, but I think you can speak to the parent because parents are frustrated, their child's dealing with X issue. We offer, Y that helps the child achieve and the parents, be able to rest at that, kind of thing. So that's how, so I don't think there's a right or wrong to that. If you're talking about parents, their kids are going to be one quick way to get to their heart and mind, for sure.
I think it's important too to always designate, especially kids and marketing products towards kids is always an example I use for designating the difference between a decision maker and the buyer, right? Like I'm thinking about that fact. And there's a lot of other markets it applies to, but it's easy to see with kids, right? Toys are marketed to kids, but the kids are not the decision maker.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I have a almost 4-year-old, and so I've been subject to advertising that targets kids, on Nickelodeon and whatnot, and half of those commercials are for ABC Mouse or whatever that company is, and then the other half are, like toys, and my son's, I want that. So some of those ads are targeted towards parents, and some are targeted towards kids. His birthday's coming up, so.
He knows it, I'm sure.
He knows. Right? Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. What kind of clients am I looking for? So there was a seminar yesterday. I didn't get to attend it, but it was called Riches and the Niches. And the idea was to, have a specific niche, because you can't be everything to everyone. So in a way, storytelling could benefit everyone. But what I've learned through a few mentors of mine is there's a real void of storytelling in the mergers and acquisition space. Private equity groups, investment banks, these are companies that have done things a certain way for decades. And well, why do we need a website that has clear messaging? I shake hands, And what they've done and are doing isn't wrong, but what I'm doing is helping to see the added value that storytelling can bring. And so there's not a lot of competition in that space. And so I'm trying to really build that niche and own it. And then in the meantime, I'm working with companies like Spoke Marketing to help go through these workshop processes for their clients. So in that case, it really could benefit just about anyone.
Well, for those kinds of organizations, the storytelling helps them guide them into the future because the clients from 20 years ago don't exist anymore.
Yeah, and there's a realization that I'm seeing, it's just as leadership changes from, some of the baby boomers retiring and the new leadership's coming on, there's recognition and openness to new ways of doing things. Yeah.
Can I share a story?
Yeah, please.
I'm a business artist. I started my own office in football. But I'm trying to reach a market that really has a passion to start business but has no idea. So here's my story. My first job, first hour, first day, I got fired. As a 12-year-old. I come back and tell my dad, it's hilarious. First day, first hour, first job. So he says, what happened? I said, well, the guy wanted some chips. I told him I'm a dishwasher. I don't sell chips. And he just took the chips and left extra money. And I told the guy that I didn't do it, but he got mad and put me out. Get out. You're a dishwasher. You don't know what you're doing. Well, my dad started a snow cone stand for me after he laughed at me. He started a snow cone stand. He said, well, if you understood, you wasn't going to let that customer leave. And that you figure out a way to get the money on the counter and give the product without ever touching it. He said, that's genius. You never touched the product. He said, but that guy didn't see that. He just figured, hey, he sold something, get out. He said, I'm gonna start your snow cone stand. So the snow cone stand, I ran all summer. They planted the seed of entrepreneurship. So my story is, there are people who have wanted to be entrepreneurs all their lives, but just not quite sure on how to do it. That's my market. Them, all you got to do is want to do it, and I'll get you there. And so, when was your seed planted as an entrepreneur? When did you first want to be an entrepreneur? I'm asking
personally, yeah. For me, yeah, I know some entrepreneurs that are lifelong entrepreneurs, and I have the story when they were 12. I never really saw myself as an entrepreneur per se, but it was when I was talking to the Microsoft chief storyteller, and I thought, oh, this is going to be my exit from TV straight to the Microsoft storytelling team. And I still keep in touch with Steve Clayton. He reached out to me a few months ago, but that opportunity didn't materialize. But it was a friend of mine who's an entrepreneur, and he's the serial entrepreneur who started 15 companies. And he was like, look, you could go work for that company, or you could do this for lots of companies and probably make more money, have more flexibility. And that's what really got my juices flowing. That was about a year before my contract was up. I started listening to how I built this, and that really kind of fanned the flames for me. And once I was on that path, I wasn't deviating. And I'm a determined person. So even despite making, pennies, starting out, starting to take off.
So I got to make that person who wants to be an entrepreneur, I got to make them feel it. I got to figure out how to say, hey.
And I think what's their pain point in a way is probably a job they feel stuck in. I would guess, right? Like a ceiling they're hitting, frustration, the lack of freedom, like those types of things are going to speak to, I would think, that person.
Well, listen, that's been my life. I haven't been, only time I've been on more than 4 years with the United States Navy. That's the only thing I did for more than 4 years. Every job outside the military, 3-4 years out. But I gave the military 6 years, and it wasn't as difficult. I probably should have said it wasn't as difficult to be in the military as it is to be a civilian job.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say for me, a big part was finding mentors, and I was active in that, seeking mentors, and I had encouragement spoken to me. So I didn't necessarily hire a coach, but I had people that said, you can do this, even when I doubted. I'm like, are you sure? Like, this is a big step. So someone like you to help coach them and encourage them and make them see that it is possible. And, I would think speaking of storytelling, all you got to do is bring them a few examples, stories. Hey, I've worked with this person. They were, stuck at a job at this company for this many years. She didn't think she could do it, but look at her now.
Most of my clients are on the job with one foot out the door.
Yeah.
They want to leave. But the first thing I suggest is reduce all of your bills.
Yeah.
Try to reduce as much as possible. Try to live on very little and get a good money car that's paid for. And I even bought a scooter on the side in case my car breaks down. I drove my scooter here from the West End because I ride a scooter. And so those are my safety nets. My military benefits, my car, my scooter, and my studio apartment, and I kind of live very small. But it makes it a little more easier when things get tight because you see we can manage things. I don't have the major car note, big house note. And I know some people trying to do it with that. I mean, $6,000 worth of bills a month. And I'm like, whoa, the job is $95,000. You only got 120 saved. Your startup is 45. It's like, you want to talk about it, but it's hard. But I see the passion, but that's the thing. They want to leave, but they can't. And if they leave, they find themselves back in it for a short period of time.
Yeah. Yeah. I know the statistics on, successful startups. It's not, well, you probably know better than me.
Hey, John, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, sorry, I couldn't be there in person. So this is Matt Scarin. John used my company as an example, and I'll say that what he did really well was very quickly he did what I was trying to accomplish for probably months, was just very quickly get to the heart of the problem that we're trying to solve, how we help the people that we're trying to help, and stop making it about us. And so it wasn't just the marketing that took a positive turn. It was also that reframing of the mind on how do we help the people that we're trying to help and add value. So I would definitely encourage anybody who's sitting there to do that 15-minute call. You might not like John as a person, but you'll like him. You'll like his product.
All right, thanks, Matt. I'm going to mute you now. Well, so this was not planned, but I appreciate it, Matt. Certainly, there's benefit whether it's me or someone else having an outside voice to bounce things off of, because we are so tied to what we do, what we know, and it's hard to separate from that. So I would encourage you to have someone and trust in business to maybe walk through the process with, and they'll be able to kind of call you on stuff, whereas we want to cling to, well, yeah, but
it's that passion, right? I mean, you talked earlier about how important it is for entrepreneurs to have the passion, but it can go too far when you're trying to tell other people what you're doing.
Yeah.
So having somebody who's trusted to help kind of tone that down and really in when needs to be. Very important.
Yep.
That could save an entrepreneur from burnout, is having that accountability partner. They don't necessarily have to be in the same space, but they have to be somebody who can listen to what you have to say, hold you accountable. Hey, you told me you were going to get that done yesterday. What happened? You can be their accountability partner too, so it can be a win-win. But find that one person. There's nothing lonelier than being a solopreneur.
Agreed, and that's how Matt and I got connected, because he left his big insurance brokerage to start his own business during the pandemic, and we get together for happy hour about once a month with, there's an attorney who meets with us, similar story. He launched out on his own, and we just share tough stories, but also challenge each other. So yeah,
we always say entrepreneurship's a team sport at ITEN, right? Like that's what we would say. Everybody goes into it thinking they're doing it on their own because that's what you hear about. But in reality, you need that team, you need this network. You need people like John and other people in the network. So
in I-10, right? Because that's you're the free resource that's just sitting there.
Here we are.
We
Here we are waiting for
Yeah.
people to come see us. Well, thanks again, John. A round of applause.